good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really pleased to have with me as my guest Timothy Yoo, who's a partner at Bird Marella. Tim, welcome to the program.
Hi, Richard. Very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
So I think you're the second Caltech alum I've interviewed who became a lawyer, so you're in very esteemed company.
Yeah, there's a few of us, but we try to stay pretty tight knit.
Definitely. Well, tell me a little bit about, I assume when you went to Caltech, you were not thinking about becoming a lawyer, or were you?
No, you're right. I was not thinking about that at all. I mean, I think when I went to Caltech, I had in mind that I would end up being an engineer or maybe going to work for a defense contractor, something like that. That was, my father was a research scientist, a biochemist. So growing up, I sort of had in mind that that's sort of the path that I was going to follow, and that's what I had in my head when I went to Caltech.
What did you study at Caltech?
So I studied applied and computational math.
Okay. Is that a relatively new major? When I was at Caltech, I don't remember that being a major at all.
I think so. So I think, when I went in, I had this notion of, I did pretty well in math in high school. I was pretty good at calculus and things like that. So, you could become a math major. But then I realized that pretty quickly that as a math major, it actually had very little to do with numbers and computation and calculation. It's really more about number theory and group theory and very, very abstract.
Yeah.
So I looked into it more, and they offered this major applied math, and there's a computational component as well. So I think it's really an amalgam of the math that you would think that engineers do, more practical applications. I think the computational component it's a mix of computer science as well, because a lot of what the ACM majors do is, they do algorithm development and try to figure out optimization problems and things like that. And they actually take those algorithms and then try to implement them in code. So we had a program at the time, I'm not sure how widespread it is now, but we had a program called MATLAB where we would actually have to try to implement these algorithms that we were developing. So I think that's where the computational part comes in.
Well, why not just do engineering or computer science then? Wouldn't that be kind of more practical and basically the same thing?
Yeah, in retrospect, perhaps so, but maybe I didn't have quite the foresight in the prescience. I guess I was just drawn to try to be an extension of my high school background and sort of doing the computations and sort of being interested in numbers and figures and things like that. So I thought that was more of a direct line path, but sure, in retrospect, maybe pursuing much more of a pure discipline as opposed to something that's in service of the other disciplines might have been more practical.
Yeah. Well, here's the inside Caltech question, inside baseball questions, and this will tell me a lot about your personality. Which house did you belong to?
That is a good probing question. So,
that'll tell me everything I need to know about you, honestly.
So my first year, I started out in the page house. So I was what I guess is colloquially known as a page boy.
Yeah.
And then I shifted as a junior. I think once I was an upperclassman, I shifted to the Avery house, which is one of the newer dorms at the time.
Right.
So if I can reflect it back on you, what house were you in, Richard?
So I was Ricketts, Scurvs.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I spent, living in the South houses, which I'm not sure. I guess maybe now it's configured differently. But that time there was only the 7 houses, the three on the south side, or 4 on the south side, and 3 on the north side. That was it.
Right. That's correct. There was the 4 on the south, and then Page and I want to say Lloyd. And am I getting this wrong? Is it right? Is it Ruddock? That's on the north side.
Ruddock.
Ricketts and Dabney and Fleming, and I'm missing one. But I think, then they built the Avery house, which is on the other side of campus later on.
Now, by the time you got there, did they get rid of Ditch Day, or is that still going? Because I remember there was all this controversy.
As far as I know, it's still going on strong, right? One of the highlights of the year. But that was certainly a big tradition, during the time when I was there, which is
Because I wonder whether it had died down, because it was pretty big when I was there. But then I thought there was some accident, or somebody got into an accident or something, and then it kind of got cut back or something.
That's not surprising to me. I'm sure they've tamped down a lot of the sort of the older traditions. That obviously back in the day, as a big part of Caltech lore, there's a lot of pranks and a lot of elaborate pranks involving a lot of mechanical engineering. So I'm sure in this day and age, maybe they thought the better of it with liability and such.
Yeah. Well, okay. So tell me, how did you decide to go to law school? Somebody talk you into it? What happened? I'm always curious to know how Caltech alums, end up going into law.
I think that's what it was. I think if anything, it was really to sort of stall on trying to figure out what I really wanted to do when I grew up. So, as I mentioned, I went to Caltech thinking I'd be an engineer and going to like maybe go work for NASA or as a defense
Yeah,
contractor or someone like that.
right.
And then I got a little bit, I don't think disillusioned is the right word, but sort of had a little bit of confusion as to, if that's the right career path for me.
Yeah.
And I had, there was a upperclassman I was close to, and she had applied to law school and ended up going. So I thought, hey, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll apply to law school, and not really thinking through that, once you apply to law school, there's you then go to law school. And then after you finish your law school studies, you presumably become a practicing lawyer. I didn't really think that far ahead. So I ended up, applying to law school. Sort of like maybe I talked myself into it because it's, from my perspective, it was more the potential is there for more of a broader experience. As you know, at Caltech, it's very focused on the sciences and tech. I think the only Bachelor of Arts degree that the school offers is a history of science. So, I think having spent a lot of time in that background, I thought having a broader focus, still able, applying your analytical skills and your logical thinking and things like that. That's what I told myself, at least. But I went to law school and I ended up really enjoying it, for a number of reasons. I think primarily what I enjoyed about law school is sort of the breadth of the different types of subjects there are and sort of different ways of sort of viewing, the world and your relationship to the world, in a sense. And then more practically, what I really enjoyed was there was a relationship between the time that you spent doing something and the outputs you got, which I didn't really get at Caltech because, as you know, I'm sure you're familiar with, I mean, you could get a physics problem set or trying to solve partial differential equations, something like that, and you could be at Sherman Fairchild Library until 4 a.m, driving yourself crazy, spending hours and hours and hours, and being no better off than you were when you started. So I sort of like this relational aspect of it's proportionate between the time that you put in and sort of what you get out of it.
That's true. I never thought about that, but that's a really good point, actually. Really, really good point. That's the first time somebody's pointed that out to me, but I definitely recognize that. Now, did you know that you wanted to go into IP? I know that's obviously what you're doing now, or did you, when did you figure that out?
I didn't really. I mean, I thought it made a lot of sense intuitively just to be able to leverage the training and the technical background. It seemed to make a lot of sense. So when I first started practice, I didn't focus primarily on IP. I really did general commercial litigation, did a little bit of antitrust, some trade secrets, some patents, but I didn't really have in mind that it was going to be IP specific. I did have in mind coming out of law school that I think I wanted to be a litigator, a disputes lawyer, as opposed to being a transactional lawyer.
Yeah.
But I think that's more a byproduct of law school tends to be very litigation focused. I mean, obviously you're learning the law through, your case books that are the outcomes of disputes.
Yeah.
So I think I was conditioned to want to veer into litigation more so than on the transactional side. In terms of the core subject area, I didn't necessarily begin that way, but I did have in mind that probably would make sense at some point. So then, I started working on patent cases, and those really spoke to me. Maybe that's not surprising given my technical background. And then also, I spent some time in overseas in Korea, in-house at an entertainment company. And at that company, obviously, a lot of their IP is soft IP, like copyrights and trademarks and things like that. So that's how I started, focusing on that aspect. So today, I do a lot of both hard IP patents as well as copyrights and trademarks. So that's kind of how I stumbled on this practice that I have.
How did you get that opportunity to go in-house in Korea? Was that something you were looking to do? Did that opportunity just present itself?
Both. So I think in my mind, I had an open mind about it. It wasn't sort of, again, the byproduct of a lot of prescience and foresight. It was really, I had in my mind that, look, at some point over the next, and I gave myself a pretty long horizon, if the right opportunity comes, I think I'd be willing to go live and work in Korea. And the reason for that is, my parents immigrated from Korea in the 1970s. I was born here in the United States. I was born in Texas, grew up here, but visited quite frequently growing up. But I had never lived there for a long, uninterrupted period of time. So figured that's something I wanted to experience and get a different perspective. So I think I had an open mind about it for a couple of years. And then the right opportunity did present itself because, the company I ended up working for, CJ Entertainment, at that time, they were looking very specifically for a California-based litigation attorney because they were going through some litigation here in California that they needed someone with, experience and expertise in. So that's how the opportunity presented itself. And I figured, it makes sense. Life is short, so take your shot.
How did you like living in Korea then?
I loved it. I loved it. It was a great experience all around. I think it was obviously it's a dynamic city, different, right? Having a different perspective from the other side of the world, literally from the other side of the world, was, I think, enlightening in a lot of ways. I think the experience of having practice as an outside counsel at a law firm and then going in-house to a company and seeing it from that perspective also was a good change professionally. And then on top of that, I ended up meeting my wife at the company. So in terms of interpersonally, it ended up being a very good decision.
Very cool. So now that you've been out of Caltech for a while, you've been practicing lawyer for a good number of years. Are you happy with your decision? Do you feel like it was a good career choice? I mean, how do you reflect on it now?
I really do. I think it was a good career choice, and it's not immediate. Obviously, you don't sort of make that decision and then decide, hey, this is a really good fit. I think it takes time. So I think what I like about this profession, this legal profession that we're in, is that I think it's a good blend of theory and practice. So you can read about something, you can read about an outcome in a case book, you can learn about it, you can do your legal research on Westlaw and figure out sort of what legal principles apply. So that's the theory aspect of it. But then there's also, you just learn by doing, by dint of repetition and doing it over and over. And then once you get that experience and sort of when the knowledge and the theory curve meets with your experience curve, that's really when I think the fun begins, and you really sort of find your place, and you realize whether it's a good fit or not. So I think that's where I am now. I think I'm 17 years into this practice. I graduated law school in 2007, and I'm just now feeling that everything that came before this was prologue, and I'm just now sort of feeling like I'm getting my bearings. So I think it's really something that takes a lot of time and repetition. But to sort of go back to your, the original question, absolutely. I think it's been a good fit for a lot of reasons. And I think the thing I really like about the practice of law is it's really kind of dovetailing to what I just said. You really have to hone your craft and work at it constantly. And you have to, and all the variables change every time. I mean, I think if you take it back one abstraction layer, every legal dispute is essentially a breach of a legal duty, whether that's a duty conferred by a contract or by a patent or general society, polite society, whatever it is. That's one abstraction layer. But at the end of the day, everything else changes. All the coefficients, all the different variables, all the witnesses, the documents, the facts, they change. So trying to keep up with that and trying to stay sharp and aware, I think creates a dynamism that I really enjoy.
Yep. Well, Tim, I really appreciate your taking the time to chat with me. It's always nice to meet another Caltech alum who's turned lawyer, and I'm super glad this all worked out for you.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed the chat as well.
This is Richard Hsu and Timothy Yoo. Thanks.